Hi everyone. Hello, hello. So this is my talk about feature film in development, the climate crisis from a polar bear's perspective or point of view. I started this project quite a long time ago, and the question is how to produce a temple feature film without credits. So I haven't produced feature films yet, and this is a very, very big, ambitious, big, hairy, audacious goal. You can look up this concept, BHAG. So feature film for theatrical release. And obviously the question how it relates to Blender, because I use Blender all the time for different aspects of Blender, compositing, CG content. Before I started this project, that was my last full-time job. I worked for Digic Pictures as a CG supervisor. You might know Digic Pictures about their AAA CG game cinematics, full CG game cinematics. And that time when I worked as CG supervisor, I felt that this is the top of my career. So, this very, top position and world-class digital content, what we made there. So, but after that, I became a visual effects supervisor for a big budget American film production, and after that I really feel that now I knew everything, more than everything, what I can know about visual effects, digital content creation, CG. However, I started to produce this feature film, so it's still in development, and I will talk about this, what is film development. So I realized there are a lot of new people I have to work with, a lot of new processes I have to learn. So, but still, every day is quite challenging. It's similar to other roles what I did before. So what I learned so far, film business in a nutshell. I will talk a little bit about how what I know about film business right now. So there are 5 main players in the film business. Obviously, the first is audience. So without audience, it really doesn't make sense to produce a film. So you can imagine this room without audience, so I'm speaking to, I don't know, oxygen molecules. So it's not without audience, there is no business. So, and if we are talking about film business, that means audience who willing to pay for our content. So that's why it's a kind of an easy way to think about film business if we are talking about theatrical release of our content. And obviously there are distributors who bring the content actually to the audience. That is their role. And the exhibitors, we call it exhibitors, but basically it's a cinema on the big screen. And the producer. So I believe many of you in this room kind of a producer in your own way, because you are producing content using Blender. But in terms of feature films, the producer can be also, called as a creator. Producer is kind of a top official who manages, organizes, and oversees all the processes during the full production life cycle. So it starts with the development, at the end ends with the distribution. And there is another very important participant, is the financier. And in Europe, actually, it's a unique type of filmmaking, because there are a lot of combination of how we can finance projects. So obviously there are state government funds and the distributors, so they can finance films like pre-sales or minimum guarantees, and bank gap financing as well. And also there are this concept of private investors, obviously, which can help us to create our project. And these players, we can call them like stakeholders. And I think the best way how we can challenge our ideas, film ideas, if we just imagine a very greedy investor who is a bit passionate about filmmaking and very, very passionate about making money, because that's the way how we can challenge our ideas, because at the end of the day, it has to be successful financially. So I distinct two types of filmmaking. One of that is the creator-centric filmmaking. What does it mean? Actually, when you start with your idea, your concept, which it usually looks like this: I have a brilliant film idea has to be made, so please give me the money. However, there is another type of filmmaking, which kind of a more business-related filmmaking when you focus on the audience. So it usually starts with something like this. Audience shows strong demand for this kind of stories, this kind of projects. And we can look for similar projects, actually. So, for example, if we consider a genre like dramedy, we can find a lot of dramedies all over the place. So we call it comparables. If we start with that, we can find a lot of invaluable information how they produced these movies, which can be a reference for us. For example, how, who were the producers, who were the talents, who were the I don't know, key creatives, DOP, directors, how did it perform in the box office, and so on. So we can collect a lot of very, very good information about how we can proceed with our projects. But it's definitely starts something like we have an idea about our genre, actually. And this is something like which is kind of a basic economics, so demand and supply tend to meet. And that's how we find our target audience, actually, how we can sell our projects. So what about this project about the polar bear? These are my comps, I would say, so reference films. And if you have seen these movies, you have an idea what is it about. I mean, the tone, the genre, and so on. Paddington is a little bit off, but I used it as a reference because of the CG protagonist. So story development, and I keep use this distinction. So audience-centric filmmaking, what does it mean in terms of story development? So you have the audience, at least you consider the genre, and after that, so let's say the genre is sci-fi, quite easy choice, and the theme could be how humanity survives in another planet. That can be a theme for a film, and the setting, for example, Mars. And now you actually have your story. I mean, have the basics, how you can develop the story, so you already have a broad view on your audience, and you can just create the script or screenplay. However, usually the creator-centric filmmaking is totally different because you have an idea about something. So the story idea, or it can be a visual concept as well. So early beginning, I started with this concept. It was a very, very early concept about the polar bear in the city, a climate refugee polar bear. But yeah, it turned out, because the climate change, the climate crisis is already a very depressing topic, I believe, and the story getting worse and worse, and it's ends with a tragic, actually. So I was just thinking about, it's not a really good idea to produce this film unless if we give the opportunity to audience to kill themselves actually after the movie. So for example, free headshot after the movie. But that was a time when I started to think about maybe comedy or infusing comedy to this project would be really a big step forward, because somehow we should solve this problem. It's a very depressing topic, how we can make it more mainstream. So that's why I have to move on to think about the audience, actually, and it turned out if I'm thinking about the audience and the story, I have to rethink about the genre. So now I consider it as kind of a tragicomedy, still not a very happy story, but I want to infuse humor, situation comedy, like in the movie Paddington and things like that, a lot of kind of humor. The theme is kind of the same, so it's about climate change, sort of, an energy crisis and things like that. The setting is still the, actually there are more places, but something similar. And I call it agile filmmaking. It's my concept, because if we start something very unclear idea, we tend to do a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things wrong, so but it's better to do something wrong than nothing. So that was my experience, and that is a quote from one of my favorite concept artists, Neville Page. I won't read it, but the point is, if we are doing something wrong, it can be a step by step leads us to the right direction. So I did a lot of failure at the very beginning. I started a short film to produce, and after that I realized maybe it's better to move to the feature film, because feature film is more like a commercial project than a short film. So, but creators tend to believe their idea is the best in the universe, including alternative universes. So the question is how we can prove that. So if we are rely on investment, and film is a very expensive feature films, live action feature films. So let's talk about money. And as I mentioned, we have to imagine a very greedy investor who will challenge us how we can prove this is a viable project. So, because they usually tend to think a low-budget mainstream box office hits. You mitigate the risk and increase the income. That's the ideal scenario, and especially if you won, for example, an Oscar. So that's the ideal scenario, and investors tend to invest something like this. However, our brilliantest idea, not necessarily that type of project. So we have to somehow have a view on the correlation between audience and the budget. And it's quite straightforward, I believe, because a mainstream film can be a big budget. And the art house film, audience perspective, art house means a very unique, very narrowed, very segmented target audience. So it has to be low budget, otherwise it won't work financially. And yeah, there can be an option, for example, low budget can be a mainstream, so it's not strictly regulated to be an art house film. However, the opposite way, it's not gonna work. So that was the point when I realized, because my idea is very unique in terms of climate refugee polar bear in the city. It's very unique. Somehow the story has to be very mainstream. So that's why, for example, humor, situation, comedy elements can be a big role on that. And still, film business is a high-risk investment. So somehow we have to prove it will work. And this is a kind of a not typical timeline, but a timeline for a feature film production. So it starts with the development. It's still in development and pre-production. So we can estimate the figures, how it will work, how much money needed. So we can move forward with pre-production. It's more money, and production is the most expensive part of the production. in general speaking. However, if you have a CGI protagonist, the post-production can be really, really expensive. And yeah, I'm somewhere here at the very, very beginning, I would say after a couple of years. And the main issue, what we call greenlit the project, so where the stakeholders committed to the project. And that means the investment can have a ROI, so return of investment. I will talk about it. However, if we can't greenlit the project, that means everything we invested is a total loss, and we ended up the development hell. So it's an official concept of filmmaking, development hell. However, how we can get out of the development hell? Quite easy, just continue. Continue with the production, with the development. However, let's say it's an ideal scenario, so we are forecasting the future, and we enter the distribution, so we have the finished film project, and there are distribution windows, so-called distribution windows. So first, obviously, the cinema screening, and it's usually the majority of the income. These are just, ballpark numbers, estimated numbers. After that, the video on demand or pay TV. After that, the subscription video on demand, and the ordinary linear TV. And after a couple of years, there are other smaller possibilities of distribution. So you can see a lot of investment can return during the years, actually. So, and just a side note, never use rounded numbers because it looks like you just get these numbers from thin air. So just fake some small numbers. It will be more official, more convincing. So, but in terms of investors, let's see what they would say. So project life cycle, 10 years, actually, when they step into the production, pre-production. So after that, net profit around 12 million is still estimation. We don't know the future. And return on investment after, 7 years of distribution, it's 80%, which sounds great. However, the annualized income, actually, it's just 10%. You can compare to the bank interest, and not that attractive. And obviously, the budget recovered after 4 years, so 4 years of uncertainty. So this guy would say, it's not the brilliantest idea, film business sucks, let's stick to crypto. That's the way. However, I feel film business film is not just about money. We know about that. We are creators here. So, and obviously in Europe, especially, it's an interesting field because there is so-called cultural policy, and the European Union Creative Europe program invests a lot into culture. So it's an important one, but really the question is why we are doing this. Filmmakers, producers, why they are spending so much time, so much effort. So there has to be a purpose for that. Obviously, not just create something, but something beyond that. So this is me. I tend to call myself as a sustainabilist or environmentalist or tree hugger for short. So I really biased with environmental topics. I am an activist for NGOs in my home country and in Europe as well. So what I see, I will talk a little bit about sustainability in a nutshell. So what I see, we are living in very, very hard times, I would say. so all over the place, all over the world, there are a lot of not too bright things, and especially if we consider the geopolitics. So What I can show you here is the climate policies in this figure. And what it tells us, after 3 decades of climate summits, global big conferences, and a lot of efforts, still what we see in this picture, this figure, there were 2 moments during these 3 decades when actually the emission decreased, and one of the 2008 global financial crisis, and the other was COVID. So it's not really telling that global political economic elite can do with this issue. So what I consider that we have to do things very differently than before. We have to do something very different. And culture, I believe, so for example, films, a free-form communication arena, so we can try things what never tried before. And what Bob Iger would say, there is no way to achieve great gains without taking great chances. And I believe this is a great chance for me and for the community as well to impact on global scale with a very, very unique mainstream feature film. So this is my BHAG. And also, there's a possibility for something. I'm sure you know about this. So yeah, we have to do things very differently than before. And I believe this concept is very unique in sort of way, climate crisis from a polar bear's point of view. And what the other things, what I realized that I have to step out from my comfort zone, so I have to do things very differently. I mean, get up from the computer and start to investigate what is out there. So I started to, during the development, I started to investigate how the film business works. I attended, for example, Berlinale, EFM, European Film Market, Cannes Film Market. Obviously, Blender Conference is a very, very good place to, have experience and insights. And obviously, there are a lot of environmental related happenings in Europe. So, but how does it, the CG polar bear fit to this story and Blender? So I realized something very early on, that I have to convince stakeholders the CG polar bear is a viable option for this project. And the other thing is kind of a commitment to Blender. I want to convince stakeholders Blender is a viable tool, actually, for this project. But early on, there was an investigation about whether we need CG for this project. So there were a lot of, I found a lot of interesting examples when practical effects was used to get animals. And major ones like Star Wars also used practical effects. However, I just analyzed the storyboards and the story, and I realized there are a lot of very, very unique movements which I really can't imagine how to solve with practical effects. So that was the point when I realized, so we have to have a CG polar bear to move on. And I met with Julia. Unfortunately, she couldn't manage to be here, but I contracted her to create this polar bear, CG polar bear from scratch. And she, in that time, she had very few work experience. However, she was very professional. She was very enthusiastic about the project, so she started to develop the polar bear. Actually, she did everything from scratch as a junior artist, and I supervised this process. So obviously, it started with the referencing. So Julia collected a lot of photo references about color, shape, and so on. So we did a lot of research on anatomy because, you know, this polar bear walks on 2 legs, so it's a little bit different scenario than real-world polar bears. And yeah, we started with the pig, actually. And after, it turned out it's similar to a polar bear. And obviously the sculpting gave the details. And yeah, after that, obviously retopology happened. So that was the first version of the polar bear base mesh with fine details. And we just realized after a while, but wait a minute, there is the fur. And if we consider the fur is quite thick, we have to have a thinner body. You can't really find reference for a polar bear without fur. So it was kind of an estimation how it would look like. And yeah, obviously there was the UV arm wrapping and early test on the fur. So yeah, early tests. After that, we move forward and we try to, you know, fit or compare to real world photos, how it looks like, fine details and shading, and obviously it depends on the lighting as well. But something happened during the fur grooming process. So it turned out the simulation is not really working. So actually, Julia did a lot of research, a lot of, you know, investigation about how to solve it. But at the end of the day, it had to do it all over again. Anyway, she managed it. So there is a kind of a CG asset which can be simulated, but it was back in 2023, so it's an old particle system. So I believe there is a need to, I don't know, recreate or reevaluate whether it works or not, especially when we have this tie on the body. It's not really working in terms of rigging and simulation at this stage where we are now. But this is the asset, what she did. So please give Julia a big round of applause because I believe, thank you, Julia. I believe, especially, I was surprised how high fidelity quality can be produced with the old tool set of Blender. So I was really amazed. And that was the stage when I moved on with the concept of the mood film. So kind of a proof of concept. What does it mean, actually, in terms of development? I mean film development. Because the proof of concept is a really good way, you know, as it said, prove the concept, prove the main idea that the polar bear in the city can be an interesting visually, can be interesting story-wise, and still in development. So it's actually a tool to convince stakeholders it will be a good project to finance. So it's kind of a full production pipeline, actually, but very tiny one compared to the whole project. So actually, we have to do everything. I mean, shooting, post-production, production, pre-production, or I mean, not that order, pre-production, production, post-production. So it started this, and I would highlight one thing which is really, really important, however, maybe it's less, common to talk about the music, because it's kind of a half of the full experience. And since I already started to develop this kind of a short film, I had a lot of materials, a lot of sounds and kind of music. And let's talk a little bit about Blender in general, because in 2012, there was the open movie. I'm sure you know about this, Tears of Steel, which was a very ambitious project at that time. Before that, as far as I know, there wasn't any kind of visual effects related project. So you might know a couple of these guys. And at that time, that was 2.63 version 2.63 Blender. So that was the time when the visual effects toolset was introduced into Blender. And after 13 years, 2025, we still use that toolset. So I believe that is a time to move on. So the mood film for me is not just about producing this Blender-based, but this short film or proof of concept of this project, but a strategic Blender visual effects project. That's my goal, to push the boundaries. I really believe Blender community, believe in Blender community. So this is MYFX-FIBGA. What does it mean? Make the visual effects in Blender great again. That is my goal. Thank you. I really believe in that. And so just show how this works, actually, the current tool set. Pretty good, I would say, but there are a lot of issues, obviously. So pre-production, what does it mean in terms of this short film or mood film? Location, we started with location scout in Budapest, so where I live. In the winter time, where we can shoot actually outdoor. And obviously, not obviously, but we didn't have location permits, so it was kind of a guerrilla project. And some of the outdoor, indoor scenes, so it's an office, the polar bear has to go to work, actually, for living. So that was his workplace. And yeah, it's just a map in Budapest where were the locations where we shot, yeah. So pre-visualization, aka previs. As I mentioned, I already started to do a lot of investigation. I mean, visual investigation, exploration, and things like that to how this film would look like. So yeah. I use that as a reference to find the right locations. This is a couple of shots, I would say, from this the set. Polar bear goes to work and things like that. So, and again, so I had in the video sequence editor the whole short film, actually, or whole mood film as a visualization, and I really rely on the sound and the music. Actually, I hired for this a real composer, Arthur Laurentine Gross, made the music, the original score for this short piece, and it's really amazing, I believe. So guerrilla shooting, what does it mean? As I mentioned, it's a little bit different than real productions. If you have ever seen a real call sheet, it's something like this. Our call sheet looked like this, a little bit different, but the basic information is there, where to shoot, when to start, and things like that. And we did it, so it's a lot of stories behind this shooting, a lot of challenges, a lot of interesting stuff. So we did the shooting and the visual effects on-set work. So this type of work, data wrangling or on-set visual effects supervision. So chrome ball and getting measures and things like that. So it went well. However, there were a lot of mistakes also. This is my favorite picture about the on-set visual effects data wrangling. And also, this is what we called after, this is the riot of visual effects artists in the downtown. So yeah, the pullover and this coat is kind of a reference for the fur, actually. Color and the material and things like that, and the color chart and the chrome ball. So after that, obviously the post-production, and it started with the plate preparation. Because we used the Blackmagic camera, it was obvious choice to use DaVinci Resolve to have the plates transferred to Blender in the right color space and the right format. A little bit of color grading. So rotoscope, yeah, I'm sure you share this feeling. We love rotoscoping, especially if we have a lot of characters, I mean a lot of people moving all around. That was the result. I would say it could be better, definitely could be better, but in terms of the time investment, it's still there. That was the most time-consuming process in the whole visual effects post-production for this shot. It's just one shot. And environmental reconstruction. So what does it mean? Actually, based on the data what we collected on set, measurements, and Google Maps data, we can recreate the this block scene with the camera, with the main buildings and road and things like that. So we have some sort of replication of the scene, a low poly representation. After that, photogrammetry, the poor man's LiDAR scan, actually, but it works quite well. So we used, obviously, Mushroom because open source and free and quite a nice tool. Just grab the photos, plug it in, hit the start, and wait. That's it. So it's quite manageable. And the result is quite good. There is one major issue usually with photogrammetry, I mean in scenarios like this, because the ground is too homogeneous, so there is no features to track, and that's why we usually miss the ground, but obviously we can extend it manually. So that is the photogrammetry. And the HDR panorama, so the high dynamic range panorama, is for lighting. However, how to proceed with the data? So we use the fisheye lens and the panorama head. That means we had 6 photos around, and every photo actually have 3 exposures. So it's 18 photo per set or shot. And this is the workflow. It not difficult, but quite complex to get from the on-set VFX data to the HDR panorama. So I used Darktable and Huggin. They are also open source tools. Darktable is for using the original photos and combine the exposures and rotating. So Huggin, the next step is there is some issue with the color space. However, so the Huggin is a tool for stitching these photographs, and this is how it looks like in Blender. It's Eevee, so it's real time, but the idea is the same. So the HDR panorama is for global lighting. What does it mean? You don't have to use any lighting. If we capture all this data, we don't have to light the scene actually. We use it as an environment texture. And the color management, what I mentioned. So it was really, really tricky stuff, and I had to do a lot of investigation how it works, but I don't want to go into details because you would kill yourself. So that is the end result actually, which is quite good. However, it was a lot of manual tweaking on the data to get the right result. So what you see here, the reference, onset reference, the chrome ball and the gray ball, and the CGI reference, I mean CGI chrome ball and gray ball, it looks quite similar, quite okay. You know, this kind of a blurry and things like that's not really important. So the animation also was, I mean, animation was quite straightforward. So just animate the character. It was a separated scene, animated, and yeah, that's it. The only problem was, as I mentioned, the rig with the tie, because the tie is not interacting with the fur. So how to solve that? I animated it separately. I had to. Light and render. So I think that this is the most interesting part of the visual effects post-production, because actually you don't light anything, you just use the data. So what does it mean? In Blender, if you just plug a color to the surface, that means it behaves like a light source, object lighting, we can call that. And if we use the photogrammetry, the result is same. So we can use actually the reconstructed environment based on, you know, the photos, so the photogrammetry, and you can see the difference. So it can be used as a reflective object as well, if you need reflections. But the polar bear is not really reflective, so we didn't use the glossy. We used only so this is kind of an indirect lighting from the environment on the polar bear. This is the reference object, and you can see if we turn on and off, there's a difference. And actually, I tried to find what is the difference on the polar bear, and it's really, really hard to see, but I believe there is difference. So this is when we turn, so the camera visibility has to be turned off, so we don't want to render directly the photogrammetry, the environment. We just use it as a light source. And after that, yeah, we can turn on and off the diffuse, and very subtle, at least in this frame, very subtle difference, but there is difference. And, you know, visual effects and movie quality has to be very, very high fidelity, very, very high quality, so it really counts. And the composite part, I would say it was also quite straightforward. So we had actually 3 layers: the polar bear, the background, and not foreground, but the separated group of people who has to be, you know, in front of the polar bear, so the roto part. Yeah, it was also an interesting experience, because Blender is a very, very good tool in terms of referencing data, I mean linking data. So the roto also could be a separated scene file, and you just link to the composite scene. So it was quite a nice experience, because that means you can outsource, or you can separate the work. So what I mentioned, the real problem was the tie, and really it's still a problem, because I don't think it's a viable solution for the whole mood film or whole this proof of concept. We should prove the tie somehow works as it should be, so kind of interacting with the fur. So it's still, but in composition, yeah, we can cheat whatever we want. So the question, what's next? Because this is only just one shot, and as I mentioned, we have I don't know, 18 shots or so for this proof of concept. So plenty of work ahead. And so that's the goal, finish this proof of concept moved film. And also, as I mentioned, make the visual effects feature in Blender great again. So somehow push the boundaries and involve the community. That's why I'm here, actually. And also, let's reverse the climate change. But it's a little bit further goal, but still, it's an important one. So join the team if you feel, so it's an interesting project. There is this QR code, so made a kind of a landing page for this project. So a lot of things to do. Obviously, if we are talking about the feature film, it matter of years. If we're talking about this mood film, proof of concept, it, I believe, matter of, I don't know, months. We will see. And yeah, please contact me if you are interested, because I really, really want to work with you on this project. And thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, let's continue. Thank you. And as far as I see, we still have a little bit of time if you have questions. Yeah.
What made you want to do the compositing in Blender?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. If we are considering so the question was why I wanted to composite it in Blender. The first very, simple reason, Blender is free and open source. I think it's an important one. The other, also an important, that you can plug right into your CG content into the composite. I think it's also very, very important if you want to iterate your processes, for example, animation, for example, the first simulation, whatever it is, it's really, worth to just plug and iterate your process. If we would use, for example, Nuke, that would mean every time you change something, you have to render and pass to the Nuke. Obviously, Nuke, as far as I know, I used Nuke a lot in the past. I believe it's way ahead from Blender compositing. However, that's why I feel this is a project to push the boundaries to develop even further the composite. I saw the composite presentation, so I believe it's very promising that Blender developers really, move forward with it. Thank you. Yes?
Are you in touch with the developers to make the visual effects?
Not yet. I mean, there was a visual effects talk last year, and I introduced that concept. I mean, not that film, but that's how I feel about Blender at the moment. We should move forward with it, and it's really interesting time because as far as I see, the animation world is all over with Blender, but the visual effects were not really. So there is plenty of place to to improve and attract actually artists and communities and companies to use Blender. Thank you. Okay.
Because the shot that you showed was
Static camera. Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's interesting. So the question was whether it's a static camera was what we used on the shooting. Moving camera, actually it's more expensive. We can use, for example, Steadicam and things like that, but it's also kind of a plus cost. So we almost use every shot with static camera. There was a slider shot, a couple of slider shot, and that's it. We had a couple of Steadicam shots, but they are really steady. I mean, really not steady cam, because we don't have a real Steadicam operator, so we used by ourselves. Thank you. Okay. There's another question, yeah?
What color science problems?
Oh. Actually, to say what was the problem is quite easy, because I was thinking about if we, so I used the Darktable for exporting the HDR data, actually, the source of the HDR panorama. And I felt that if I export EXR and I choose the right color space, what I thought is the right color space, it will work. However, it was an EXR, it turned out it is sRGB still. I'm not sure how it works, really, but when I switched back to sRGB, but it was quite after a while. Sorry, just my time is over. So when I switched to sRGB, it worked. So that proved that EXR can be an sRGB. Maybe I'm wrong, so that's why a little bit confusing, but that was the case. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention, and you come. Thank you. Thank you.